Thank you and welcome back to this final segment of the show for today. We're talking to Mr. Matthew Walker Jr. and of course the topic is the Freedom Rides, and Mr. Walker himself was a participant in the Freedom Rides in 1961. And of course, Mr. Walker, you were talking about that your voyage on the bus itself. Let's pick up at that point.
Okay, we had left Montgomery, we had passed into Mississippi, and as I said, the bus was doing about 95 miles an hour when it came across the Alabama-Mississippi border. Shortly after we got into Mississippi, the bus stopped and was boarded by a good number of soldiers. I think they may have been National Guardsmen. And so the bus had experienced, the Freedom Ride had experienced, as we all know, quite a bit of violence in Alabama. And we've later learned that the Attorney General had talked to the governors of these states and had discouraged them as far as allowing violence. So I believe that's the reason they had these armed soldiers board the bus. They stood in the aisle all the way to Jackson. It was a very exciting ride. I do remember as we proceeded, looking out the window, counting, and I'll never forget, I counted, I think it was 26 state trooper cars riding behind us, and a helicopter continuously circling overhead. We would pass little towns, and there would be whites standing on the side of the road, jeering, yelling very unpleasant things at us, but we were fortunate to have avoided any violence all the way to Jackson. When we got to Jackson, we walked into the bus station, and as soon as we walked into the bus station, we were escorted to the waiting paddy wagons from the Jackson police. We were immediately arrested, put in jail there in Hinds County Jail, and the Freedom Riders kept on coming. As a matter of fact, the Jackson newspaper had a little box on the front page where every day they would give the number of riders arrested. So this was a continuing thing. We filled up the Hinds County Jail, and after we'd been there maybe a week or two, they shipped us out to Parchman Penitentiary. Parchman was notorious for its unsavory atmosphere, and we knew that when we got to Parchman that things would be more difficult. Our introduction began with, of course, a strip search. You had to take a shower, then you were interrogated. And the interrogation was such that you were sat in a chair surrounded by police, and if you answered without saying sir, you were immediately struck across the head with a billy club. Some of the riders were beaten up pretty badly at this stage, simply because they failed to say yes sir or no sir. We were dealt with rather harshly by the guards while we were in jail, and as a matter of fact, things got to the point where the lawyers complained to the Justice Department, and they finally, I think we may have been there for several weeks. I mean, we're talking 40+ years ago, and my memory's not perfect, over 40 years. But I think we stayed at Parchman for several weeks, and we were finally released, rode back to Nashville on the train. One or two things that I do remember about the Hinds County Jail and the trip into Jackson, which I feel I should mention, is that on the way, once we got into the city of Jackson, of course, with the big police escort and so forth, everybody knew this was a bus full of Freedom Riders. The reaction of the whites was hostility. They would yell things and so forth. And the black people were so happy to see us. You could see them waving, and some of them were actually crying because they were just so moved that somebody would come down there and try to do something about the situation. While we were in jail to protest being arrested, we did go on a hunger strike right there in Hinds County, and the locals would send us just about every day care packages with candy bars, cigarettes, and so forth. And since we were on a hunger strike, we didn't eat anything. We just drank water, but several of us started smoking simply because the cigarettes helped kill the pain of hunger. The conditions in Mississippi were very oppressive at the time. I do remember one radio announcer making mention of how the Freedom Riders seemed to be so well organized and disciplined, and this fellow was an announcer on a local black radio station there in Jackson. Because of this favorable comment, he was immediately fired from his job from that radio station. There were other prisoners in the jail at Hines County, and I can remember another prisoner who was doing 7 years in jail for stealing a sack of chicken feed. So this is just something to give you some idea of the kind of society that existed there at that time. But one thing I should point out that there were on that bus quite a number of white people who participated with us, and the thing about it with them was in earlier instances when there was violence, the white toughs would single them out and treat them a little more harshly simply because they regarded them as traitors and so forth. But throughout the movement, there have always been whites who have participated just as fully as blacks, and I think this is one point that needs to be made clear.
You know, when you think about the legacy, you know, you and others were a part of that movement, and we know that there are so many problems today, and you know, dealing with in the environment and so many other things. We also understand that you're also involved in this environmental racism kind of thing. Let's have you over the last few minutes to say something about that.
Well, my involvement in the environmental situation is something that more or less came to me because I live in an area of Nashville called Bordeaux, and Bordeaux happens to have an unusual number of unwanted facilities. One of the terms in the environmental scene often used is LULU, L-U-L-U, which stands for locally unwanted land use. There are many locally unwanted land uses in Bordeaux, things you wouldn't find in comparable communities around the city. We've got prisons in Bordeaux, we've got a massive oil storage tanks, we've got a massive insurance company, automobile junkyard, we've got a gun range in Bordeaux, and there is a large stagnant pond which may breed mosquitoes because of a dirt mining operation. The biggest problem we have right now is that of a landfill. Bordeaux has been a site of dumps for the city trash for the past 30 years. This landfill applied almost 2 years ago now for a new permit which would allow it to operate not until 2008, but until 2018. This permit would also allow them to take, in addition to what they're taking now, construction and demolition debris, it would also allow them to take in garbage, household and commercial. It would also allow them to operate 24 hours a week. We are inundated with trash trucks as it is now. It would also allow them to use more space to deposit and bury garbage, and worst of all, it would allow them to operate an additional 10 years, that is until the year 2018. We've been successful to this point in having the Metro Solid Waste Regional Board deny this waste management landfill a new permit. The denial has been appealed by Waste Management. It's presently in Chancery Court, and we're looking forward to a ruling any day. We have retained legal help, and we are thus far able to say the permit has been denied. But it is possible the court will rule in favor of Waste Management and allow them a new permit. If that happens, we will have to appeal. If the court upholds the board's decision and denies a new permit to Waste Management, we expect Waste Management will appeal. Either way it goes, we're going to have to continue the legal battle.
There's a legal battle associated with this.
There is a legal battle associated with this. In recent memory, this is the first time any group in Bordeaux has gotten together to mount a legal campaign against a locally unwanted land use. A number of pre-existing neighborhood organizations have gotten together to form an umbrella group known as Bordeaux Beautiful Incorporated. Bordeaux Beautiful has hired and still has retained the services of an attorney, and this is how we've gotten to this point. But whichever way the court rules, we'll need more legal representation. We're asking people to help us continue the fight to see to it that Bordeaux is treated with the same respect as other parts of the city. We need your help. If at all possible, please send donations to Bordeaux Beautiful Legal Defense Fund, 511 Emerald Court, Nashville, Tennessee, 37218, and the telephone number is 615-256-71.
And of course, we're near the end of this program. Let me thank you for coming by and giving us some excellent information. Let me encourage our audience to tune in again next week for another informative edition of Comments. Thank you and good morning.